To support this podcast, go to positivesarcasm.com/donate. Any amount is appreciated. Once again, positivesarcasm.com/donate. Thank you and enjoy the program. Jay here, positivesarcasm.com, recorded here from the Spare Parts Studio alongside New Hampshire's beautiful seacoast. Like, subscribe, share, and donate. Positivesarcasm.com/donate. Any amounts appreciated. For entertainment purposes only. For entertainment purposes only. Find me on Instagram at @positive_sarcasm. You can also hit me up on my website, positivesarcasm.com. Go to the contact page. You can you can send me all kinds of information, requests and comments and concern, things like that. So you can go there. Or you can just email me directly, positivesarcasm@outlook.com. So yeah, there you go. Another week, another episode. I got a bunch of tabs open. I don't even know what to think of this. I don't know if you guys saw the Anthony Fauci proceedings on Capitol Hill, the Oversight Committee, all of these congressmen basically asking questions that he knew he wasn't going to answer. I mean, I know what to think of it, but I don't know what to think of it. To me, it's the defeatist in me, if there is a defeatist in me, or is it nihilist? Maybe it's the nihilist. Nothing means anything. Is that what that means? No, it's all bullshit. None of it, basically. It just seems like grandstanding to me. It just seems like there's what point is there to it? So I'll fill you in the best I can. I want to give you some background to what was asked or what was requested, how he got there. Does he have to? Does he have to answer questions? Did he do anything illegal? If so, where do we go from here, if anywhere? So Anthony Fauci, who is the director of the NIH, National Institute of Health, and he oversaw the response of the HIV crisis in the 1980s. He's been directly involved with gain of function research, or alleged to have been involved with gain of function research in countries not only the United States but apparently overseas, including China. He's been involved with labs that apparently test on a breed of dogs called beagles, and he also oversaw the NIH during the COVID pandemic. So here we are now. He was subpoenaed by Congress. When you are subpoenaed by Congress, I double checked to make sure, but you essentially have to go. So you're subpoenaed. So ultimately, it is not a trial. It is a legal proceeding, but it is not a trial. You have not been accused of any crimes. So generally, when you are accused of a crime or you're charged with a crime. So let's just say he did something illegal on a federal level. He would not be subpoenaed by Congress to a oversight committee. He would be charged with a federal crime and indicted. That means you have a hearing coming up. And that means there's going to be a jury of your peers that is going to be selected. And then from there, you're ultimately going to be charged with a crime or multiple crimes. That hasn't happened. That hasn't happened because I don't think it can happen, because in around 2024, he was pardoned. Even though some are saying it was an auto pen, it's like, there's a high probability that Dr. Anthony Fauci is not going to have his pardon overturned, because I don't think there's any legal way to do it. Regardless of whether I want it to happen or not, it's just I don't think it can happen. There is a statement, there's an auto signature, it's there, basically saying he's been pardoned, and that's the end of it. So he cannot be charged with any crime regarding, I guess, this thing that supposedly killed so many people, put us basically on lockdown for almost an entire year, in some places even longer. Our constitutional rights were stripped away from us. And that's where I draw a line. My principles I draw a line on is where my constitutional rights are affected. I live in a state where my constitutional rights are very well intact. My First Amendment, I can say whatever the hell I want as long as I am not inciting violence. Okay, that is the core First Amendment right there. The Second Amendment, I 100% in my state am fully intact. Fully intact. Okay, there's no question about it. I have constitutional carry in this state, and that's it. That's pretty much it. Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Yeah, there's no issues here. I don't have these problems. Life, liberty, and the pursuit are well intact from where I'm sitting. The Fifth Amendment was enacted multiple times yesterday. So, yes, he had to show up to this hearing. Not this hearing, excuse me. This, I guess, a congressional hearing. It's not a court at all. It's obvious. It's ultimately generally at this point, these congressional hearings, these congressional oversight hearings, they're just a lot of people asking questions or asking leading questions, and then and not really giving, because they only have like a 5-minute block of time. The chair recognizes so and so for 5 minutes. Then that person has a load of questions. A lot of the times, those questions don't get properly answered because for two reasons. One, the recognized person doesn't have enough time the recognized person is not getting the answer quick enough, so they need to move on. They have a list of answers. They need to get to all their questions within that 5-minute block. And two, they already have an agenda. They already know as soon as what's going to come out of this person's mouth. They've already got what they wanted out of it merely by asking the question, and then they generally scold the person for some reason. I've seen this, and regardless of whether or not I agree with that person doing the scolding, they've only got 5 minutes. So they're looking for that 5 minutes. They want their 5 minutes of fame ultimately on there to basically ask a bunch of questions, but they already know the answers to in their head, and then that's it. And then they say something at the end of it that's usually like, and then they move, and that's it. It's pretty much what I've been seeing lately. And these committees generally have both sides of the aisle that represent them. So the funny thing is that the subpoena has to show up, but apparently some of the committee members don't, which I find interesting. I think, in my opinion, if you're going to subpoena somebody and force them to come to Capitol Hill, then everybody who issued that subpoena should have to be there. Because if you're going to say that somebody is in contempt of court or in contempt of Congress for whether it be being a dickhead, not showing up, I don't know, whatever, then if you do the subpoenaing and you don't show up for the subpoena as a member of Congress and you sit on that committee, I think you better have a very good goddamn reason as to why you didn't show up. Otherwise, I think you should be held in contempt too, because if you're not going to take the subpoena and the position that you're in seriously, why should the person who's being subpoenaed even bother to take you seriously at all, or even bother to show up? I mean, this dude, he's got a presidential pardon that will probably never be overturned, because I don't know if you really want to go down that road, but he's got a presidential pardon. So if you're not going to take it seriously to bother showing up to the proceedings, why should they? Are you going to hold him in contempt of court, or in contempt of Congress? Well, according to like some fucking no name on Reddit, under the statute of the wrongful refusal to comply with a congressional subpoena, it's made punishable by fine of up to $1,000 and imprisonment for up to 1 year. That's it. That's for contempt. That's all. First of all, do I think Anthony Fauci's got $1,000? Pretty sure he does. Do I think if he was to be found guilty in contempt of court, he could just continue to plead the Fifth Amendment, and is he really going to get 1 year? I don't think so. I think his lawyers could easily argue this, that, and the other thing, and either he would get time served or plea him down to basically get like a white collar prison, or ultimately or nothing. It would just be a bunch of legal bullshit that would go on for years, and it would end up being nothing. A bunch of lawyers make a bunch of money. Fauci's already has his legacy in his own head and with his own peers, and it's ultimately a nothing burger. So if that's all that he can be held in contempt of, he's got a pardon. I'm not rooting for him, but the process is clearly failed because it doesn't seem updated, and it just doesn't seem like it can pierce through this veil. I just don't think it can. I also think that if they were to enforce these statutes of punishable in contempt and imprisonment and things like that, it's like you understand that this can come back on you. So it's another thought of mine, another reason why this whole thing is just grandstanding. It's just a lot of finger pointing and name calling and shouting and getting on your affiliated news network to say blah 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 blah. I did this and he should be ashamed and fuck this guy. Yeah, maybe so, but you can't do anything, or you could, but you have to understand that this could come back on you. Because you have congressional committees that comprise not only of one side of the aisle, but another. And if you're found in contempt, like it's, okay, you went after this person and da-da-da. Well, what about this thing that you did that's still, you're still under, what the hell do they call it? Statute of limitations. So you could be found in contempt for refusing to answer questions on this thing that you lied about, and now you're going to go to prison. And then it just turns into this little contempt civil war. And then you start to see a system break down right before our very eyes. And do I think Anthony Fauci lied? Yeah, I did. I do. I don't think he lied. I think he's still lying. I think he deliberately fucking did all this for whatever reason other than sociopathy. He wanted to be a big fucking star. Or he truly thinks, like Herman Goring, that he was doing the best. He truly was the best for the people. He was so in his head that he refuses to back down. This guy's been paid by the American people since the 1980s, if not earlier. He oversaw the AIDS crisis. Well, it was HIV. From what many people's opinions, it was HIV was, created by a sect of folks, but Fauci is responsible for making it AIDS, for forcing AZT on the world, which apparently was like a death drug. And from a lot of accounts and interviews and clinical trials, that this stuff actually made people worse. It made them less healthy to the point where, the HIV virus turns into AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, where apparently when you took AZT, you got sick enough, your white blood cell, your T cells, everything fell to the point where AIDS took over, and you were so weak that the AIDS just took over and killed you. So a lot like people who have comorbidities, they're super fat, they have no vitamin D in their system, they don't take care of themselves, they don't eat right, they don't exercise, they don't do a lot of things, they don't sleep well, they're already on drugs that kill their immune system as is. And then something, a nice, cute little virus comes from overseas and takes them out. So, what's the difference here? I can tell you there's no difference from the person who implemented these stupid ideas. But looking at the facts at hand here, yeah, I think he lied about all this stuff. Yeah, I think he forced a lot of terrible policies along the people, upon us. My gym was closed for a long period of time. I worked from home for a long period of time. I changed a lot of my habits. Now, did I ultimately benefit from the situation? Yes, I did. Here's the thing: from COVID, I benefited. Ultimately, I did. And I'll explain it to you the best I know how. It opened the doorway for me to move away from an area that I found to be toxic and dangerous. It allowed me to see the opportunity to move away from the big cities, like a lot of people did, and find joy finally towards the seacoast. However, it took me 4 years to not 4 years. It took me about like 3 to 4 years to eventually get back here in a long-term capacity. But granted, it put me in this direction. It put me in this direction because I knew something was very wrong with how everything was going. I saw it before my very eyes, how everything was stirred up. So ultimately, and did it make me a healthier person? Yeah, because I'm smart enough and educated enough, not by school, mind you, not by college, mind you, but just by my own ability to look it up and do my own research and talk to people with, half a brain. So I saw it as an opportunity to get out of an area that was toxic and dangerous, find a better career path, redesign, set up a new studio, speak my mind a little more fluidly, establish multiple channel networks in which I could voice my opinion, which is why I'm also on Rumble as well. And it has brought me peace and quiet. It has brought Chase into my life. It has brought my fiance into my life. All these things that I did in reaction to such a vile thing, such as the lockdown, which is 100% against our constitutional rights. But I did. Ultimately, yeah, it made my life better. But I'm just one. It made a lot of people's lives worse. There were people that were unhealthy, and they were put on they were already on the wrong path, and they were put on an even worse path. We have a questionable vaccine out there, which now is there is discussion around blood clots and cytokine storms and health issues and myocarditis, which is basically tissue damage in the heart. There's all kinds of. There was the censorship issues on a lot of the channels. There was government overreach into a lot of these social medias, as YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. There was a lot of things. There was account freezing. When it came to Canada, there was the account freezing of the people trying to fund the truckers in Canada that were protesting the vaccine mandates against the Trucking Foundation. I mean, you understand. Truckers from Canada is very, very important. They truck a lot of shit down here to the United States that I come in contact with on a weekly basis. And they were seen as villains by their own government, their local police force. People who funded them had their accounts frozen. Their bank accounts were fucking frozen. That's like that. Once you breach the boundary of life, liberty, and pursuit, and you do things like force people into their homes, take away their ability to spend money how they want to, and how they see fit. You don't allow them to talk, voice their own opinions, whether they are right or wrong or askew or question. That's a breach for me. And in my opinion, Fauci was one of those pawns, not a pawn, really, more of a knight or a bishop. He was one of those figureheads that helped lead the charge on a lot of these things, and also was in charge of causing some of these problems to begin with. These are some of the arguments that are being made against him. The problem is we can't do anything about it. Nothing that's going to amount to shit. It's ultimately like Al Capone. Al Capone was never arrested for mass murder, smuggling, RICO crimes, organized crime, anything like that. Al Capone, first of all, The Godfather whitewash, great movie. I love The Godfather. But like Dallas Buyer Club, it completely whitewashes the actual true events of the gang community, the Italian mafia, the Cosa Nostra. And I'm not here to talk about that. I'm just saying ultimately he was a part of the problem. I should come back on point here. There's nothing we can do about it. Really. Like, oh yeah, Al Capone, he wasn't arrested for any of the crimes he committed, except for tax evasion. That was it. We got him on a financial technicality of, hey, where are you putting that money? And ultimately, he was made an example of because we knew we couldn't get him on any other accounts. On any other counts. Murder, racketeering. Which, right in itself, all the gangland activities he was involved in, which ultimately the reason he became a big deal is because we suppressed something. We suppressed alcohol. Can't do that in the United States. Oh, no, you can't do that. He rose to power. Because of that, he had something that people wanted, and he had a means of production and transportation to get it to them. You can't, the same thing goes for Anthony Fauci. You can't get him on anything unless it's a new crime. Like, he was pardoned. Well, what was he pardoned for? Like, obviously, if he committed some crimes, it doesn't make him invincible. It doesn't make him invincible to the justice system, but it makes it a hell of a lot harder to really persecute him for anything. You'd have to find some hardcore technicalities to really justify even bothering to put him away. But with like Al Capone, it's like, yeah, tax evasion, okay, and then you put him in jail for how many years? So Al Capone's sentence. I'll really type that in. Al Capone's sentence. Sentence. Al Capone was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison for income tax evasion. The sentence was handed down by Judge James Wilkerson in November of 24th, 1931. Following his conviction, the penalty included 11 years in federal prison, 5 for 2 felony counts, and 1 for 2 misdemeanor counts, plus a concurrent 6-month sentence for contempt of court. 6-month sentence for contempt of court. Okay? Contempt of court. That's what Anthony Fauci is supposedly facing, is a 6-month jail sentence. $50,000 fine, $7,600 in court costs, and a liability for $215,000 in back taxes plus interest. And here's the thing. Al Capone got out. He went to Alcatraz in 1934, and he was released in 1939 for good behavior. 6 years. He went to jail for 6 years. He was released on good behavior. So he's out and about. He died. And this thing is, he lived for another like 8 years. He died in 1947 in Miami Beach. Now, here's the thing: is Al Capone was not a fit person. He was a fatty. He was sick and I don't remember what he died of, but he died of something like syphilis or some shit. But how many people did Al Capone kill? How many people did Al Capone... How many people is he responsible for killing? Let's look that up. How many people... Al Capone's responsible... Let's see. Al Capone's murders. I guess we'll look that up. Al Capone was responsible for an estimated 200 to 700 murders, either directly or by ordering of his gang. The outfit to commit then during the Prohibition era. While police records attributed 33 specific murders to him, historians suggest the total number of killings ordered by his organization may have been higher, estimates up to 500. So Al Capone is responsible for somewhere between 200 and 700 murders. How many people died in the United States? How many people in the United States died, just the United States alone, died due to the actions of Anthony Fauci? There's a good question. How many people died by that? How many people died in the United States supposedly from COVID? That's another question in it entirely, because it was ultimately like, okay, there was the what was it? The hospital COVID death bonus. This is fucking crazy. So basically, if somebody died of like a gunshot wound, but you said died from COVID, supposedly, we're going to confirm this. You got the hospital got money from the government or something for just reporting like dead from COVID. Hospital, let's see, hospital bonus. I can't fucking spell today. I'm sorry. Hospital bonus, COVID cause of death. I'm curious about this because there's so much underneath what just happened yesterday, which was ultimately nothing. It was just yesterday what I saw, well, it happened this week. What I saw yesterday was ultimately just a pinnacle of our failures on the TV screen. Like, yep, this is our failure right here in the nutshell. All these people died. All these rights were lost. All this technocracy and censorship and banning. All this stuff took place, and there's nothing we can do about it. And here's a perfect example of why. Sources in the search context allege under the CARES Act and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services directives, hospitals received increased payments if a patient's cause of death was listed as COVID-19, even if the patient did not die directly from the virus. These claims, attributed to attorney Thomas Renz, a CMS whistleblower, and organizations like the Association for American Physicians and Surgeons, suggest financial incentive structure where hospitals could earn an estimated $100,000 or more per patient by following specific federal treatment protocols. The alleged bonus structure includes a 20% boost in the entire hospital bill for using remdesivir instead of other treatments like ivermectin, larger bonus payments for placing patients on mechanical ventilations, which killed a lot of people in New York, additional funds for COVID-19 diagnosis, admissions, and testing, extra payments to coroners for listing COVID-19 as the cause of death. Critics describe these sources argue these incentives turn hospitals into bounty hunters, leading over to 800,000 estimated deaths due to restricted access to alternative treatments and mandatory use of specific drugs and ventilators. The CARES Act reportedly provided these bonuses while CMS waivers allegedly suspended standard patient rights, including visitation and informed consent. So the question is, how many people, COVID, just keep it in mind. Just keep this in mind. Al Capone got 6 years in prison. Al Capone only served 6 years in prison. Maybe paid like $100,000 in fines. Not even. And lived in Miami Beach for the rest of his life. But he only killed 200 to 700 people. And the only thing that put him in prison? A couple counts of tax evasion. That's it. Now, COVID deaths on ventilators. Just on ventilators alone. Approximately 25 to 88% of COVID-19 patients placed on ventilators died. That's a fucking wide number. Depending upon the study population and whether outcomes were finalized. Early data from Northwell Health in New York initially reported an 88% mortality rate for ventilated patients with known outcomes. But this figure was later clarified to reflect that 72% of patients remained hospitalized at the time of reporting, with their final death rate for ventilated patients updated to 24.5%. Ventilator-associated pneumonia was a significant complication occurring in 57% of COVID-19 patients on ventilators, compared to 25% of those with other forms of pneumonia. While VAP contributed to deaths when infections did not resolve, studies author and medical experts emphasize that ventilators saved lives and patients placed on them would likely have died from respiratory failure without the intervention. Age impact. Mortality was significantly higher for older adults, with 97% of ventilated patients over the age of 65 dying in the initial health analysis compared to 76 of those 18 to 65. Misinformation. Claims that ventilators cause nearly all COVID-19s are considered misleading as they misinterpret data regarding secondary infections as the primary cause of death rather than the underlying viral disease. So what is that? So that was... When was that updated? So all these articles replaced COVID-19, the Great COVID Ventilator Cover-Up. That was May of 2025. That was June. So the arguments ultimately, how many people died though? I wanted to know. How many people died on ventilators though? That's the question. Okay. So maybe that's not a good path to go down. Reason being because I thought there was more. I thought they'd actually give me a number. But they're still arguing about how many people actually died when they were put on ventilators. Or here's the thing is like how many articles are out there? I'm curious. I actually want to know. I want to see. So that's CNN and Live Science. Okay. So according to CNN, records of 5,700 patients with coronavirus diseases hospitalized at Northwell Health. Final outcomes were okay. So according to this article, and then let's click on that article. So according to CNN, about a quarter of COVID-19 patients put on ventilators. This was in 2020. That was in 2020. That's a fucking mess. This was also in 2020. Nearly 9 in 10 COVID-19 patients who were put on ventilators died. New York hospital data suggests. That doesn't mean the ventilators caused harm, though. Age made a difference. So of the 2,600 patients, ventilated or not, about 20. So that meant the majority, or 3,000 of the patients, were still hospitalized when the study ended, which could have biased the findings. The research found that among the patients that were hospitalized, the most common underlying conditions were hypertension, around 56%, obesity, 41%, and diabetes, 33.8%. The bleed statistics don't imply that ventilators caused harm. Rather, patients who are put on ventilators typically have more severe diseases and were therefore likelier to die. So they died from comorbidities, which is also sad because that's very preventable. Okay. University of California, Santa Cruz. Well, that's reassuring. So they're still fighting about that. But the question is how many people died from how many deaths were caused? If you have a couple thousand people who are put on ventilators, which is a bad idea, could Fauci have said something about that? Maybe. How many people did flattening the curve kill? How many people from nursing homes? How many people shoved into nursing homes died as a result of just being cooped up? That was Governor Cuomo. So this is... I'm just curious here, like how many people just died just in one sect of Fauci's at the direction of Anthony Fauci. So when like Herman Goring, obviously, did he or did he not know about the camps, whether they were concentration camps or death camps? Did he know about them? Was he responsible for them? Was that somebody under him? Ultimately, you are responsible for the nation. There are other people you can blame for this as well, from top down. But I'm telling you this, it's like Al Capone did not have a presidential pardon. He only served 6 years and maybe $100,000. Anthony Fauci oversaw and guided the entire nation on COVID-19 protocols. And in my opinion, lied about a lot of it. Killing how many people? And how many people still? Like, for example, vaccine mandates. That's one. Wrong treatment protocol. So, for example, the origins of the virus. There's claims he lied about that. The efficiency of mask usage. Lied about that. Containment of the virus, such as also known as flattening the curve. Lied about that. Treatment. Secondary treatments that would have voided the Emergency Use Authorization Act, such as ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, which were looked down upon, and not only looked down upon, but restricted. Then there was remdesivir, and there was vaccine schedules. Remdesivir didn't work. It was also seen as dangerous. Vaccine schedules. There was concerns with Johnson & Johnson. There were studies revealing it caused, like strokes and shit like that. So the question, how many deaths is he directly responsible for? How many deaths is he indirectly responsible for? Now, if you want to know my thoughts on it, I think he's responsible for the vast majority of them, because when it came to the origin story, gain of function, the lab that it came from, that originally was seen as a conspiracy theory. Now it has evidence, legitimate evidence, and has been acknowledged by government entities. Whole organization stating, yeah, probably came from that lab. After all this time, yeah, it probably came from that lab in Wuhan. The Institute of Virology that was specifically working on fucking coronaviruses. which nowadays is nothing more than the sniffles or a cough. So he was responsible for being involved in the funding of that. So bioweapon. So he's responsible for making a bioweapon. If you take a virus and you study it to the point where it becomes either stronger, more viral, more replicatable, more spreadable, whatever words you want to use. If you do that and people die because of it, it gets out and kills people, don't you think you'd be held responsible? Like, I don't know, if I taught a sheep how to shoot a machine gun, and I put body armor on him, and I taught him how to escape the farm, and all of a sudden this sheep goes around and just starts murdering people, I might be responsible. If I train a soldier how to kill, how to stab, how to maim, how to survive out in the wild, and then all of a sudden he gets out and kills a bunch of people, wouldn't I be responsible? If I create something that is designed to kill and spread, and it gets out and it kills and spreads, and I lie about it, then I could be held responsible. It's a silly. It's all silly. My example of a murderous sheep is silly, but so is the idea of seeing. You know what? Let's give our direct competitor, which is China. They are one of our largest business partners per se, because we buy a ton of shit from them. It's funny that we imported chips from them, clothing, apparel, food, and viruses. The same supplements that could be used to mitigate a lot of the symptoms from the coronavirus came from the same country that fucking gave us it. If you ever look at your pill bottles, your supplement bottles, your vitamin D, your beetroot, your fucking potassium pills, you look at the bottom. Look at where it came from. It came from China. A lot of those supplements came from China. They're manufactured there. Creatine. A lot of creatine vats. China. That's all Chinese. So, what is he responsible for, in my opinion? He's to me, he's responsible for lying about the origins of the virus. He's responsible for lying about the efficiency of masks. He's responsible about containment, the flattening the curve, which didn't work and caused more problems than it created. Caused more problems than it solved. He lied about treatment by talking down and assisting and restricting access to monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and other useful, healthy things. He lied about the health risks of COVID, so ultimately still pushing the idea that the vaccines work when the argument is maybe they don't, or ultimately you're doing something which has no effect on something that was ultimately going to die. I mean, we could have gained herd immunity without this fucking thing. Never acknowledged the fact that people had comorbidities, massive amounts of them, that our responses to them, that the hospitals obviously were ill-equipped to handle this situation. We're basically going to put the fate of the nation in a bunch of coked-up nurse whores who are doing fucking TikTok dances while people are dying all around from who the fuck knows what. Stick them on a ventilator. They can't talk. They can't defend themselves. They can't do anything there. They're basically locked into their own death. We're going to go in the other room and do some fucking dances on our Snapchats and be praised as fucking heroes. And he's out there taking pictures with them, getting emotional blowjobs from them. He's responsible for that. And lying about the ultimate health risks from them, where you probably most likely, even if you had some comorbidities, you could recover from it. You could recover from it. And a lot of people were just like, it's fine. If it was the fucking plague, if it was the Black Plague, or if it was Ebola, there's concerns there. It wasn't. It was completely overblown. It was basically manufactured. But there's lies there. You have to understand, like, back in the early 20th century, we had things like Spanish flu and polio. things that killed a lot of people. But you have to understand, like, people were dirty back then. People were very dirty. The health concerns of people back then, like, people didn't shower back then. They didn't brush their teeth back then. They didn't have supplementation back then. People died earlier. They worked in conditions which were unsustainable. They worked in coal factories. The city streets were covered in shit and bacteria. I mean, it was disgusting. That's why people were sick all the time. The evolution of hygiene to where we are now is why why you see normal people not get as sick as often. It's not because of vaccines, in my opinion. It's because people have just, in time, had access to healthier activities. Like, I live in a community, I see people going for walks every single day. They have access to food. They have access to just low-level care. They shower. You don't understand, just cleaning your body in general, twice a day, once or twice a day, that is a significant jump. Just having access to hot water. Statistically, having just access to hot water in general cures so many ailments that would have killed the entire population. Like, that is something to be considered. Just those basic things right now are something that is so overlooked. Like, oh, so many people died from the Black Plague, or died from the Spanish flu, or died from polio. You have to remember the conditions in which people lived in. You also have to take into account that people who were in New York almost never saw the sun. They lived in, they basically were breathing in ceramic brake dust 24/7 because you live in these big cities. The stress of living in these big cities, you spend all your time on your phones. You don't do anything that is really health conscious. And then all of a sudden, you have constant contact with people 24/7 who are probably unhealthy. And you're probably unhealthy as well. It's just a big vat. And then you shove them all indoors. It just sounds like a bad fucking idea. Breathing fresh air is important. But none of this stuff, all these basic, crude arguments were never taken into account. They were just shoved aside. Do this, do this, do this, don't ask questions. And he is responsible for spreading it. But he doesn't have to answer any of those questions. Why? Why? Because the punishment for him not answering the questions is so infinitesimal, it's better to just say nothing and plead the fifth than to say, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, I was wrong, or no, that never happened, I don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 fuck you. He doesn't have to, because the punishment is so infinitesimal. He doesn't have to. If I lied that much prior to a committee hearing, I'd plead the fifth as well. I just probably wouldn't even fucking show up. Or I would just act like a dickhead. Under the statute of wrongful refusal to comply with the congressional submittee, it's made it punishable up to $1,000 in imprisonment until up to 3 years. A committee may vote to seek a contempt citation against a recalcitrant witness. This action is then reported to the House. If it's enforced, Fauci will come back on them. Like I just talked about that. If they enforce any of the stuff on Fauci, you're going to have backlash. You're just gonna. It's just going to be, you're making him into a martyr. They're punishing me, my blah, blah, blah. It's like my rights as American. And it just hardens the stance. It just hardens other people's resolve. But it is ultimately all grandstanding. Nothing was truly learned. Nothing was actually uncovered. And nothing that we don't already know that I just told you about. Yeah, I get that ultimately I'm not able to tell you how many people he might be responsible for killing. that there's still an argument about ventilators and vaccines, and that data is still new because nobody's paying for the clinical trials. It's a fucking mess, dude. It's like dropping a bomb on Hiroshima. You could say about 100-something thousand people died. You can't give me an exact number, though, because you don't know if Uncle Bob was there. Yeah, he was there. Maybe he got vaporized. I don't fucking know. But a bunch of people died. So that's it. COVID happened. A bunch of people died. We don't know if they died from COVID or not. His death certificate says died from COVID. The hospital got a bunch of money for it. Time goes on. Nurses are expensive. Doctors are expensive. But we weren't allowed to question it. Because we're too fucking stupid as a nation. And I understand that, yeah. The general public is not very bright. But individuals should still have the ability to access information and interpret it how they see fit. We're hoping to have smarter people. But it's still people reading the newspaper every single morning, getting there. Oh, I know what I need to know, what I need to know for the day. Time to go out there and spread mistruths. Or they sit down for the 6 o'clock news. This is still a thing. This is very much a boomer thing. Very much a boomer thing. Now, I've had my say about the boomers, obviously the rural ones and the urban ones, but this is still very much a thing where they go to their standard news sources, they look at this information, they assume that info, and then they move on. It's like minimal. Now, some of them could be wrong, some of them could be right, but I see the people that are out there doing like actual work, they're working on their lawns, they're taking care of things, they're out there being active, they're out there serving a purpose. Those people are healthy. They're doing things, their body is staying active. But when you enclose people indoors, you don't allow them to do anything. Yeah, when the mind decays, the body follows. And what you did to people was you broke their fucking brains. You broke their fucking brains by scaring them half to death that this thing was going to come all the way across the world and kill you and grandma. You broke their brains. Stay inside. This thing is going to kill us all. Don't worry. There's going to be a fucking superhuman man who was a hero during the AIDS pandemic back in the 80s, which killed a bunch of gay dudes but didn't fucking have to. It's not their fault. They just wanted to fuck. That's all they wanted to do. Whatever, let them. I don't care. But then you filled them full of AZT and murdered half of them. You stuck everybody inside and scared them half to death. That until the vaccine came out and you got it jabbed in you, nobody was safe. You couldn't come out until you had 2 shots in your system, and then only then could you say hi to your neighbor. And then all of a sudden, the information got twisted. It wasn't, I'm not taking the shot to protect myself from you. I was taking the shot. Yeah. So I'm wearing a mask to protect myself from you, or something to that effect. It was all just a big old jumble pile of shit. Ivermectin was for horses. Yeah, it works on horses too, by the way. It's an anti-parasitic drug. It's a wonder drug. It's still listed as one. Has no real side effects. It's like B12. Just makes you better. There's so much we still don't know, but there's enough to know that it stinks. It smells like bullshit. And he was one of the reasons. It was a giant failure, and he was one of the ringleaders of it. I could try to find you statistics on it, but I'm not going to waste your time because they're going to get revised. They're going to get revised again because it's like, when you add it up, it's like, when you add up some of the notes that I'm talking about. Okay. For example, let's just say each thing here caused a certain amount of deaths. Lying about the origins of the virus caused a large amount of deaths. The efficiency of masks caused a large amount of deaths. Containment of the virus caused a large amount of deaths. Treatment of the virus caused a lot of deaths. Overall, the telling people about the health risks of COVID caused deaths. The over-the-counter supplementation, lying about that, caused deaths. There was no common sense used during this crisis because it was all lied about. So each lie that he told, let's just say each lie caused a few thousand deaths. I'm being as minimalistic as possible. If one, by lying to the American people, you've just one lie, you have now caused more deaths than Al Capone. Al Capone is an infamous figure. Fucking gang warlord. But he only got 6 years. That dude killed 500 people? Allegedly? He went to jail for 6 years, got off on good behavior. Anthony Fauci's not going to jail at all. He's got a presidential pardon. There's nothing that can be done. And here's the thing, is like, ultimately, he pled the Fifth Amendment, which means I don't have to answer your questions and get fucked. That's it. He's got a bunch of lawyers sitting there saying, don't say anything. The worst case scenario they can come after you is in contempt. They have to have actual evidence. And even if you have actual evidence, you can't prosecute him. He's pardoned. You're basically just showing us a failure of the system is all you're showing us. There's nothing that can be done. If you bring a bunch of evidence, it's like, whatever, I got a pardon. I got a pardon. Fuck you. What can be, can you go after him civilly? Maybe. What state can go after him civilly? Can some states file actions against him? There's only one thing that can be done, is to ultimately reduce the amount of infrastructure that he's responsible for creating. The NIH needs to be stripped down. The Department of Health and Human Services needs to be stripped down. The government as an entity needs to be stripped down. It needs to be reduced. There's a, let's see. Because it's gotten so big that all these, first of all these government employees, when they're done being a government employee, they just go to a corporate agency and make fucking 3 times the amount of money. According to Open Secrets data, 76 out of 94 Pfizer Inc. Lobbyists in 2023 had previously held government jobs. This indicates a significant revolving door where the majority of Pfizer's government affairs staff come from public service backgrounds. So they go and work at the government, and then after that, they go to work for Pfizer. That's questionable. Nobody's issued a subpoena to CEO Albert Bourla of Pfizer. There's no subpoena against him. None. And they supposedly covered up evidence in their trials, the vaccine trials. The Pfizer was the big vaccine. There was the Johnson & Johnson, which apparently caused like strokes or something. Then there was the Moderna one, and then there was the Pfizer one, which was the big one. And apparently they hid a bunch of data from during those vaccine trials that never made it to light. And they just go, oh, here's the here's the pretty data. You don't need to, don't worry about the elephant over there. Don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. This is good. Don't worry about it. Oh, those other supplements and medications, ivermectin, and monoclonal antibody. Nah, that's all shit. That's terrible. First of all, we can't use the emergency. We can't speed up the approval of this vaccine for emergency authorization use because all of these other drugs are still out there. So we can't get this to the front and get it to the people and make a shitload of money because these other things exist. So we can't get approval for it. It was all about that. Money and control, power. But you had all these lobbyists, 76 out of 94. Went from the government to go to work for Pfizer. No subpoena for Albert Bourla. No subpoena for Albert Bourla. None. I'd want to know I'd want to know about him. I'm more interested in him. I know Fauci's a piece of shit. Been a piece of shit since the 1980s. But like I said, nothing was truly learned. The only solution, really, at this point is, okay, there was like that Jimmy Savile, who was like a pedophile. It was a pedophile in Great Britain, apparently. It was like a singer or something. raped a bunch of kids. Only until after his death was it really like brought to light. Oh yeah, by the way, he was a piece of shit. Well, that's fucking Captain Hindsight right there. Thanks for telling us. Should have let us know while he was doing it, or before he started doing it. That probably would have been better. Now we got all these fucked up kids. Raped by this dirty British guy. Well, he's dead now. Nothing we can do about it. Sorry. Oh, now he's a piece of shit. There's only one solution. Break down the institution that made him powerful to begin with. It's like arresting a street trafficker. No. You need the guy who's supplying all the juice above him. You need the organization. You need that brought down. There's an article from the Niskanen Center. It's like, and it's by the Will Wilkinson. It's entitled, I'll finish with this. What if we can't make the government smaller? Wagner's law says that as an economy's per capita output grows larger over time, government spending consumes a larger share of that output. There's no reason to believe Wagner's law is a real social scientific law. That it captures a real relationship of strict if this, then that causal necessity, which is to say it shouldn't be a miracle if GDP, gross domestic, increased for a few decades, but the government's share of GDP didn't. Yet that never happens in countries with political systems like ours. As Andrea Berg, an economist at the University of Lund, puts it, quote, given how rare laws are in the social sciences, the positive correlation between the public sector share of GDP and real GDP per capita remains an important regularity. The notion that income growth will raise taxes and government spending, including social spending, is the most durable black box in the whole rise of the state literature. Wagner's law names a real, observed, robust empirical pattern, but as Lindert says, it's a black box. That underlying dynamic that makes the pattern so consistent is a bit obscure. Right-leaning public choice economists often talk the way spending ratchets up during crisis and the rent-seeking logic of diffuse costs and concentrated benefits. Left-leaning economists such as Lindert emphasize that people benefit from spending on education, poverty alleviation, and social insurance. When those most likely to benefit from social spending have a political voice, they demand more of it. No doubt a mix of all this with a dash of Bamal's cost disease is going on inside the black box. Berg and others have pointed out that the strength of the relationship between economic growth and government growth seems to have weakened among some of the wealthiest countries. That makes sense. Once government services are good enough and further government growth becomes too expensive to sustain, spending needs to level off to maintain the economic growth required to finance those good enough services. Still, there's a robust positive relationship, and it holds just about everywhere. Where people get richer, they seem to want more government. In particular, they want more welfare spending. In mainly the positive relationship between rising demand for welfare services / transfers and rising GDP per capita, that drives Wagner. I know this is a little high level, but bear with it because you'll be able to find some nuggets in here that you'll at least understand. That drives Wagner's law. The chart below shows the long-term trends in per capita federal spending in the United States. Real spending per capita on human resources, which includes Social Security, Medicare, and other public assistance transfers, have grown at a remarkably steady rate. And we've seen actual evidence of these systems, Social Security, Medicare, and other public system transfer programs, gross amounts of fraud as just uncovered recently. Robustness of this relationship is completely maddening if you intensely favor smaller government. Wagner's law suggests that as a general matter, the only real reliable method to shrink government, and not just the rate of government's growth, is to shrink the economy. But most libertarians and conservatives want both things at the same time, smaller government and rising prosperity. Indeed, free marketeers tend to insist that the key to achieving higher rates of economic growth is slashing the size of government. After all, it's true that the private sector is better than the government of putting resources to their most productive use, and that some public spending crowds out private investment. That's true in most cases. Private enterprise generally, the resources that are used for private enterprise is generally used better than for government. It just is. It just is by evidence of how the government, when the government gets involved in something, it's usually an oversized fucking hammer that's overpriced on a really tiny cheap nail. It's just really like bam, and then so many other people are affected. And a lot of times the hammer doesn't even hit the fucking nail. It hits the table or it hits the person holding the nail. It causes more problems than it creates solutions. Because you got so many people holding that hammer and also saying, what's in it for me if you actually hit that nail? And what kind of nail should it be? And what are we nailing into? And what happens with the next nail? And you should buy that nail and that hammer from my company. I'll put a bid in for it. I know some people. If you're really committed to the idea of stronger economic growth through government contraction, you're pretty much committed to the idea that the pattern behind Wagner's Law is sort of a fluke, a contingent correlation without any real cause and effect basis, and that there's got to be some workaround or fix. I found that you can understand a lot about right-leaning policy and political strategy by seeing it as a desperate, if unwitting, quest to find and exploit loopholes in Wagner's Law. For example, you might think that Democratic public will stop wanting to plow an increasing spend percentage of rising economic output into welfare spending once it finally becomes aware of the true theory of government and economics. In this case, you may pin your hopes on efforts to educate the public about how the virtues of free markets and limited government. I've done my share to bring this gospel to the American people, but if you have been following the proposals of this year's presidential contenders or glanced at the unrelenting spending trendlines, it's hard to say attempts at economic and political education have had any effect at all. No choices, just a lack of options. Other bits of supply-side fiscal dogma, it goes on, basically saying that there's simply no path here to smaller government. If tax cuts aren't self-funding and simply leave a hole in the budget, if a beast, as Nikan showed, does not interfere, therefore gets starved. Instead, spending feels cheap, the beast grows even more, and the tax bill gets shifted to the future. There's simply no path here to the smaller government. So what's the point of salient and painful taxes? It takes less money to collect sales taxes and VATs. Tax avoidance is less of an issue, and their salience minimizes the chance that they'll hurt economic output by discouraging work effort. That's all obviously good unless you think that's intentionally rigging taxes to do most possible economic damage will actually minimize the economic damage of taxation by eventually generating popular demand for lower rates and lower rate levels of spending. I'll admit that this is what I used to think, but it's a really weird idea. There's a longer-term challenge for those of us who favor limited constitutional government is to try to convince voters to reduce their demand for services financed by federal spending. However, the fact of the matter is that our well-funded and well-organized attempts to convince voters to reduce their demand for the services financed by spending so far have all failed. So there's no feasible path. There's no feasible path. So it talks about ultimately how do we downsize the Leviathan, the giant beast that is the government. Well, first of all, you're going to create some really wild times when you do that. Not that I have a problem with it, because we're already going through some really wild times. There's so many promises, and there isn't just one beast. There isn't just one beast. You have the government, and then you have the non-governmental organizations that are funded by the government, and then you have other private donors who are funding all these other NGOs that are causing other problems as well. You have to starve not just one beast. You have to starve all of the beasts. The Hydra of many heads. But the Hydra apparently has multiple bodies as well. The only way to kill off these Anthony Fauci is one head of the Hydra. One. He's one head of the Hydra. This Hydra has too many heads, too many bodies, too many hearts, and it has such a large appetite. It just eats everything in its path. And I'm not sure I know what to do to stop it, because everybody in Congress and in government, as governmental employee, they have too many incentives to keep it going. One, their guaranteed government job. Two, their ability to invest in these companies as a member of Congress. Three, the ability to get out of Congress or get out of their government job when they're done and go work in the commercial sector, i.e., 76 out of 94 people went for work from the federal government, and then they went to work for Pfizer. So you have incentives to keep the train going and not admit to anybody that what you're doing is bullshit. This job isn't needed. The things we were doing that was wrong. The things that we implemented were wrong. He's one man. The thing is he's one man that we can't pin this shit on. When the market collapsed in 2008, one of many, by the way, nobody was there was people to blame, but nobody got arrested or indicted. There was one guy. But the banks still got their money, got bailed out, got bonuses, and people got fucked. The problem is there's two idiots to blame here. Three. One, the government was too fucking big and made decisions about our money. Two, the market, the people who decided, oh, we can do this and make a shit ton of money, and we can wager people's entire pensions and 401ks and mortgages so that we can get rich because we're too big to fail. And we're going to prove that. And three, the public. We see the American dream and our safety as a top priority. The American dream is a top priority. But you have to understand, do you really think you can afford a $600,000 house? Do you have the ability? Number one, do you have a job that you can sustain? Do you have a job that's going to sustain that type of mortgage? Are you really living in a reality where you can actually afford something like that? We were fed a bunch of bullshit, but we ate it. We believed it. So we're partly to blame for voting in these people, for voting for more spending and more government overreach, for buying for taking a subprime loan when maybe we shouldn't have. We're responsible for our own deaths in a lot of ways where maybe, okay, you should have stayed home and not going to the hospital. There was or ultimately type 2 diabetes, you did it to yourself. You got fat, you did it to yourself. We're responsible. Where along the lines did we take our own well-being and put it in the hands of subprime mortgage lenders, congressmen, and federal government, Anthony Fauci? When did we stop being responsible for our own actions, our own health, and our own monetary policy and give it to these fucking weirdos? It's partially our fault for not realizing for not saying loud enough that this guy's a piece of shit, that not only this guy's a piece of shit, but this whole organization is a pile of shit. Peter Boghossian just said recently, he wants to see basically all of the whole college institution be burned to the fucking ground because he thinks the tree is just too infected. There's nothing we can do to save it. He might be right. The thing is, we can do without a large amount of college institutions. The thing is, when you do that, they're too big to fail. If they go down, that's a lot of real. I just talked about it in last week's podcast. You're going to lose a lot of revenue is going to go down. You're going to see. Let's just say you just lose the financial institutions, everything that revolves around a college town. How much fucking unemployment and desolation of college towns and the businesses and the jobs it's creating. It's wild. It's wild. Same thing with the government. Can you reduce the amount of government? I don't know if you can. If you try to burn it to the ground, the power vacuum it's going to create would, I think, ultimately ruin this country. So I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. Well, I have an answer, but I have a solution. Yes, I do think, and I've written about it, I do think stock trading among congressmen should be banned. Congressmen from top on, president, vice president, congresspeople, anybody in a voting capacity for the federal government or in a congressional committee environment. I think none of them, anybody who speaks for the American people, I think ultimately should not have access to individual stock portfolios. So, for example, not individual stocks. You should not be allowed to buy SoFi, United Health Group, Symbotic, Nvidia, Halliburton. You shouldn't be allowed to buy any of that stuff. If you want to invest in, create a retirement fund, mutual funds, treasury bills, CDs, ETFs, index funds, broad scope stuff, I would allow for that. And there could be a large a list of, if you are a government employee or a congressperson who's been voted in by the people, you're voted in by the people. And I would say the same thing for judges, Supreme Court judges. Yeah, if you're put in that position, I don't think you should be allowed to invest, because you get paid a lot of money when you do that, by the way. Okay? I don't give a fuck what anybody says. $100,000 at a minimum, $100,000 is still a lot of money. You do something for 10 years and you do something for 10 years and you get paid $100,000 a year, you've grossed $1 million over the course of 10 years. You may not have received $1 million over 10 years, but you have grossed $1 million. You've put yourself in a position to be financially stable by the time you get to retirement, a well-deserved retirement. So reducing or eliminating their ability to access stocks, buy and trade, that's one. They should be barred from working in certain agencies. Yes, obviously. There's a lot of things. There's so many laws and constitutional things that are in place, they're just not getting enforced. They just get overlooked. There's so many people that commit treason, that commit perjury under oath. They take bribes. They do this. They do that. But we don't enforce that stuff. We don't go after those people. We don't say anything. We don't say shit to Bill Gates. We don't say anything out to Anthony Fauci other than shame on you for pleading the Fifth Amendment. Nothing. It's all bullshit. It's all grandstanding. It's all just a big show. At the end of the day, no one person flips the bill. It all falls on us who pays taxes. At the end of the day, I still do pay federal taxes. Thousands of dollars a year. This man's going to go into retirement still thinking he's a fucking hero, and that's going to be the end of it. I don't know how to resolve it in the next 10 to 15 years. There has to be a major turn of events. I just don't know. I don't know. I just see this getting progressively worse. But that doesn't mean you can't fight. It doesn't mean you can't fight. Doesn't mean you can't talk about it. Doesn't mean you can't stop spending your money on things that are not necessary. Like, stop buying Oreo cookies. Stop going to see shitty movies with that are just big bloated Hollywood piles of shit. Stop voting in people who don't actually have your best interest in heart. There's a lot of things you could stop doing, and that might rescue us. That might, but unfortunately, it's your opinion against 50% of the population who thinks you're wrong, and a large amount of the population who thinks not only are you wrong, but you should be silenced or ridiculed because of it. So how do you fight that? Because ultimately, people are just not listening. They're just not listening, or they're misinterpreting what's going on. Let's see what happens when the boomer generation starts to decline and starts falling off the map, and their voice is counted less and less. I'm curious to see what the new, maybe more informed population does when it comes to voting, running for office, business-wise, what they create. Maybe it's just when you cause this much damage to an economy, to a population of people, it takes generations to fix. It takes decades and generations to fix. And it will take a massive loss of a population when the boomer generation starts to disappear. That's going to be 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. When they're all finally gone, we can finally throw our cards on the table and be like, all right, where are we now? Are we in more control than we used to be? Do we have more control and free will over our own lives than in 2020, when we were basically told, stay in your homes, don't do this, don't do that? It broke a lot of people's brains. I hope there is something that we can do going forward, but there's too many people pushing against some of the common sense and the questioning that I'm coming about. Because all these things that I'm talking about, they're not conspiracy. There's legitimate statistics. There's obviously, I can't point out the fire in a lot of these things. Like, for example, the ventilators. There's talk between 25 and 88%. All right, split it down the fucking middle then. If half the people on ventilators died, that's enough to say, hey, let's knock this off because clearly it's not working. Oh, but well, if it saved one person, maybe that one person could have been saved. You didn't put them on a fucking ventilator. Or if they weren't eating Cheetos, pounds of Cheetos, 2 days before they caught COVID. Or if you didn't incentivize, maybe if you didn't incentivize the hospitals to receive bonuses from these marked COVID deaths, maybe they would have been less inclined to do that. It seems more like population murder to me. It seemed like a way to get your point across. You can find me on Instagram at @positive_sarcasm. You can find me on, you can hit me up on my website, Positive Sarcasm. I don't really have a fucking true answer for you on this. I just, like I said, I'm letting you know right now to actually put a cap on this. That congressional hearing, I don't think is going to lead to anything. It just shows us a giant failure in our system where one man got to become a fucking celebrity once again, and for basically lying about everything that happened, and he's gonna get away with it. He's gonna get away with it. He already has gotten away with it. So that is the lesson to be learned here. The government failed us, and he's gonna get away with it. All the things that we've proven to be true and everything that he lied about, he can just plead the fifth and almost nothing will happen. And everybody else who lied, they're all going to get away with it. And that's the moral of the story. The system is... Anthony Fauci got so big that he's too big to fail. You can hit me up through my website, Positive Sarcasm. Go to the contact page. You can email me there. Tell me I'm a piece of shit. Or you can email me directly if you want to tell me I'm a piece of shit. PositiveSarcasm@outlook.com. You can find me anywhere podcasts are downloadable. Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podcast Addict. Spotify likes to remove some of my things every now and then, but whatever. It's not because of what I'm saying. It's because sometimes there's some music in the background. They get a little butthurt about it. And it's fine. Whatever. Fuck it. There's still plenty of ways to find it. You can find it on Substack. It's downloadable, streamable. You can also download it and stream it directly from my website, PositiveSarcasm.com. You can also view this podcast. Video version of this podcast is available on YouTube, Positive Sarcasm Podcast, and Rumble, Positive Sarcasm Podcast. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my day. Actually, no, I'm not. I got other shit to do. I got some writing to do. I got wedding stuff to do and research. I'm busy. I got this fucking sunburn on my face. I look like a fucking purple cauliflower right now. So, anyways. We're done here. Thank you for listening, watching, and subscribing. Find me wherever podcast downloadable. Email me directly, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll check on you guys next week. Recorded here from the Spare Parts Studio, alongside New Hampshire's beautiful and free Seacoast. For entertainment purposes only, this has been a Positive Sarcasm presentation.